recently watched an interesting video from Carl Benjamin of the Lotus Eaters channel. Carl is someone who started off as a sort of rational centre-leftist but has been mugged by reality and now makes content more centred towards traditionalism and conservatism. And in the video he made a very interesting point about the right wing in general. Obviously it's a very tough time for anyone who believes in traditional values and would like to maintain Britain and British culture at the forefront of Great Britain. Mad that, isn't it? Carl makes the point that with the betrayal and breakdown of the Conservative Party, a vacuum has opened up in which a real traditional party could step in with the interests of the British people at the forefront. However, instead we've got loads of splinter parties, Reclaim, Reform, the Heritage Party, so on and so on. Carl believes that any future party should unify and have 5 simple principles. Number 1, that we should stop apologising for our past and we've got nothing to be guilty for. Number 2, to realise that immigration is destroying Britain and needs to be reversed urgently. Number 3, to undo Blair's reforms. Every party after Blair has been Blairite and that needs to stop. 4, to re-implement traditional family values. And 5, to implement educational reform. So we actually implement British cultural values in our education rather than woke postmodern ones. Now, I think that's a noble vision and a good point that Carl's making if we're to stand any chance in the future, but I think there's several key points I'd like to make on it. Number 1, in the original video, Carl points to many sources to bolster his argument, leaning on the figures of T.S. Eliot and C.S. Lewis. That's very important because these 2 figures were Anglicans. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to convert you to Christianity, but to point out that if we're to stand any chance in the future, we need to have a collective mythos that unifies us. There's a reason why Carl, an atheist, leans on T.S. Eliot and C.S. Lewis, because they speak to an English mythos. It's that cultural Christianity, that cultural mythos, that cultural value system that binds a people. It's what makes Islam strong as a force in modern Britain. And this wishy-washy, free-form individualist liberalism we have now does not have the strength to stand up to either Islam nor the totalitarian wokeness in the mainstream culture. This is the foundation upon which any future British right parties and movements can unify, despite having their different beliefs on the surface, as Carl continues.
This, I believe, means that the British right needs to unify, to choose new champions who can carry this message to the public. I think we need to put aside personal grievances for the sake of the country itself and choose those respectable figures who have already stepped through the inferno of progressive media outrage and are willing to stand with their heads held high on these values and advance this agenda in the face of enemy fire. We can then act as a chorus, which amplifies this message far and wide and helps put it in the consciousness of the average man or woman. We must vote for real substantive change. The old parties are all captured, and we must choose something new.
Now, one major problem we have on the right is many people are very opinionated. They have their own takes on things and they're very libertarian by nature, meaning they want to be left alone. That's understandable, but it means that we're not as agreeable as the left and we're not prone to mass ideological thinking. Now, while the mass ideological thinking obviously has a very big downside for the left, i.e. wokeism and the madness that comes with that, it does at least unify them into this post-Marxist system. This is again why we need this shared mythos to unify us, but one area where I may disagree with Carl is not so much that we should do this for electoral reasons. I think we should be doing this so we have an underlying movement which will win elections on the whole. What I mean by this is we need to be deeply rooted in our mythos, in European identity, in British culture to know how we can build a vision that speaks to the wisdom of the past and creates a bright vision for the future. This is why, as I keep saying in recent videos, despite it being a depressing time on the surface with the erosion of Britain and British values, it's also an exciting time. It allows us to think new thoughts, think about a new future, and unify in new ways. It's high time to remember that we're custodians of an ancient peoples and an ancient culture that has achieved magnificent things. We've had bigger problems than this before, and we can wake up to a new reality if we're willing to work for it. Anyway, this is a topic with many moving parts that will start to develop all the more in the next few years, so do let me know your thoughts down below and do consider subscribing to the channel.